There is not a single part of me that will ever fear death again. Why? Because what I experienced was the most beautiful, miraculous, and love-filled homecoming imaginable. Death wasn't scary or uncomfortable, quite the opposite. It was pure bliss, a sense of finally arriving home. It felt like a profound knowing, an absolute awareness that I was deeply connected to something much greater, an infinite oneness that was as much a part of me as I was of it. In that place, there was no separation, only beauty, love, and absolute belonging. Being immersed in that state, I had no desire to return to my physical life. In fact, while there, my earthly existence seemed distant, almost forgotten. But as I was fully expanding into this limitless oneness, suddenly I was snapped back into my body. Opening my eyes, I felt disoriented and overwhelmed, desperate to hold on to that indescribable sense of love and unity. Yet, no matter how hard I tried, that infinite connection felt like sand slipping through my fingers. I grappled to hold on to the warmth, the completeness, but it was fading, as if a veil was slowly closing, shutting me out from that miraculous reality. My name is Anastasia Wesselink Moellering. I grew up in an extremely rural area of Michigan, in conditions of absolute poverty and amid a deeply toxic and abusive family. Imagine the feeling of coming home from school without knowing if you would have food on the table that night. Depending on the season, we didn't even have electricity or a telephone. With no neighbors nearby or a community to rely on, I found myself completely alone. Being an only child and with no resources around, I had to learn to fend for myself from an early age. In light of this scenario, I decided that I would never go through that again. My greatest motivation became to secure a different future for myself and my children. Following what I was taught, I believed that success lay in climbing the corporate ladder. I got married in my early 20s, had my first child, and a few years later, my second child was born. That was when we decided to move from Michigan to Chicago. It was there that my corporate career really took off. From a regular employee, I climbed the ranks until I reached the position of vice president. They say that those who come from an abusive family, especially one marked by alcoholism, have two possible paths: to become an alcoholic or to transform into a workaholic. I chose the latter. I became an extremely present mother. I participated in the PTA, was the mother and coach of the football team, and tried to be everything for my children that I never had. I dedicated every ounce of my energy to ensuring that they had a dignified and comfortable life. My life became extremely hectic. My career was thriving while my children grew up and became increasingly involved in extracurricular activities. I lived a frenzied routine, always rushing from one appointment to the next, barely having time to breathe. But it is precisely during these busy phases that we tend to neglect what seems most trivial: medical appointments, dentist visits, small care routines that, when ignored for too long, can completely change our lives. That's exactly what happened to me. In December 2019, I had to undergo a very unusual and invasive dental procedure. It involved several steps, lasting for several hours. The dentist seated me in the chair and put a mask on my face, administering a gas that would put me in a state of light sedation, the famous twilight state, where you're not completely unconscious, but you're also not fully aware. It's a kind of comfortable limbo that helps make invasive procedures more bearable. While I was there, relaxing with the mask on, the dentist was preparing something beside the chair, with his back to me. Suddenly, I began to feel a very strange sensation. It felt as if, with each inhale, I was lifting out of my body, and with each exhale, I was abruptly falling back into it. With every breath, I felt myself rising higher until I was sure that something was not right. When I thought that perhaps I should alert the dentist, something completely unexpected happened. In an instant, I was no longer in my body. Suddenly, I found myself on the ceiling of the room, looking down and observing my body in the chair. My first reaction was to think, what am I doing up here? It may seem like a simple question, but consider its profound meaning. I was looking at my own body down below while simultaneously being fully aware that the figure below was not me. My true essence, the part I recognized as me, was up there, floating near the ceiling and contemplating the scene with amazement. I soon realized that I felt no emotional connection to that body. It was just a physical shell, a vessel I recognized as mine, yet completely detached from me. My mind then raced with a chilling question. Did I die? And as that question echoed inside me, something even more surprising occurred. I was suddenly flipped around, finding myself mere inches from the ceiling tiles, marveling at tiny details like accumulated dust in an absolutely fascinating way. At that moment, I was overwhelmed by a profound sense of wonder. That trivial dust seemed extraordinary because now I was seeing the world through the eyes of my soul. It was no longer the common physical vision. It was an entirely different, intense, and meaningful perception. Soon after, as if my eyes closed to that reality, the scene changed radically. Upon reopening them, I found myself transported to a completely different place, far away from that dentist's office. When I opened my eyes again, I was in an incredibly welcoming place, enveloped by a warm and soft sensation, something akin to the smooth texture of butter melting on your skin. At the same time, everything around me was indistinguishable, a dark, indefinable vastness. There were no clear forms, reference points, or anything easily recognizable. Despite this, there was no fear or discomfort at all. On the contrary, that environment was pure ecstasy, a happiness so intense that it could only be described as coming home. In that wonderful state, I felt an absolute connection with something infinitely greater, a vast consciousness, a whole of which I was a part and which in turn was part of me. It was a union so deep and perfect that there was no distinction between me and that infinite love. Even the most beautiful experiences I ever had on earth, such as the arrival of my children or moments of passion, were small in comparison to the unconditional, complete love I was experiencing. I call this place unity because it was there that I profoundly understood that all souls that have existed, exist, and will ever exist are interconnected. Every feeling, every memory, every experience was completely accessible, without limits or barriers. It was as if I could expand infinitely and merge with each of those experiences. There was no past or future, only an eternal present, where all those stories and feelings were at my disposal in a single timeless moment. Imagine for a moment gathering all the experiences that every soul on earth has ever lived and will yet live. Today, we are 8 billion people, but countless souls have already passed through here, and many more will come. Now, think of condensing all these experiences into just a single grain of sand. Then, visualize all the other grains of sand on this planet representing the infinite experiences that souls have outside this physical world. This metaphor, as impressive as it may be, is only a shadow of how vast and unlimited that place of unity where I found myself truly was. I was completely integrated into that space of infinite connection. Every experience, every emotion, every existence became instantly accessible. There was no past or future, only an eternal now, where everything simply existed in its fullness. Curiously, I didn't even need to ask questions, for the answers were already within me. All it took was to awaken my curiosity about something, and that understanding flowed naturally into my consciousness, as if it had always been there, waiting for the moment to be accessed. The more I explored, the more curiosity I felt, diving deeper and deeper into this perfect unity. However, upon returning to my physical life, I realized that there were limits to what I could bring back from that experience. Some insights remained clear in my memory, distinct and defined, while others seemed so grand and complex that, honestly, I believe it will take a lifetime to fully absorb and understand everything I experienced in that brief moment outside of time. In that sublime state of love and absolute connection, I had no desire whatsoever to return to my physical life. I wasn't even aware of earthly existence at that moment. However, suddenly, as if pulled by an irresistible force, I was thrown back into my physical body. Upon opening my eyes, I was overcome by a profound sense of disorientation. All that remained was the despair of trying to hold on to that infinite connection, that indescribable love, which slipped from my hands like fine sand. No matter how much I tried to cling to that feeling, it continued to slip through my fingers as if a curtain were slowly closing, separating me from that spiritual paradise. Since then, I no longer have any fear of death. I know with absolute certainty that the passage to the other side is the most beautiful, welcoming, and love-filled experience anyone can ever live. It is a true return to our true home. Upon waking, I saw the dentist above me, visibly worried. The curious thing is that to this day, I don't know how long my experience lasted. It could have been seconds or minutes, because in that spiritual space, time completely loses its meaning. A lifetime seems to fit into seconds, and seconds seem to expand beyond an eternity. After this extraordinary experience, I began an intense search to understand what had happened to me. Many people might classify what I experienced as an out-of-body experience or something induced by the drugs used during the procedure. But I had already experienced altered states through medications before, and I affirm with absolute certainty that nothing of that sort compared to what I experienced on the other side. This experience brought me profound and unshakable knowledge, something no one can ever take away from me. It was only some time later, days, weeks, months, and even years, before I finally managed to name what had happened. I found explanations when I connected with IANS, International Association of Near-Death Studies, and other groups that research and share these extraordinary experiences. From that point on, I became an avid reader of accounts from other people who had gone through near-death experiences, NDEs. I discovered with wonder that there are many common threads in our stories, even though each account also contains unique and personal elements. I am often asked why my experience is different from that of others who have also gone through NDEs. I usually reply that it is similar to the life we lead here on Earth. No human existence is identical to another. Each person has their own experiences and personal challenges. Likewise, our spiritual experiences reflect our individuality. However, just as we share a basic human experience, there is also a common essence on the other side, a universal connection that unites us, which I felt intensely during my spiritual journey. Another question I always receive is whether I encountered or experienced God during my NDE. This is a delicate subject because God is often something we try to personify, shaping it into an image that makes sense in our earthly reality. However, after my experience, I began to perceive God in a completely different way. For me, God is not something or someone that can be limited to a physical form or a conventional definition. God is much more a verb than a noun. It's love in action, a dynamic and continuous force. This divine essence that I experienced is movement, fullness, and unconditional love in constant expansion. It is not static, nor is it an object or even a specific being. It is something far beyond that. It is a vibrant energy that permeates everything, connecting every soul, every experience, every existence in an infinite movement of unity and absolute love. This definition was perhaps one of the greatest revelations I had during my experience, and even today I am in a constant process of understanding and deepening that insight. 5 years after this transformative experience, I still have new perceptions, insights, and moments of clarity about what I lived through. Gradually, I find new ways to explain and better translate the indescribable, not only to share with others, but to better understand for myself everything I witnessed. and perhaps the most significant change in my life after returning was the gradual distancing from the corporate world. Suddenly, that intense ambition to climb the corporate ladder lost its meaning, and I began to seek something much deeper and more significant. After returning from such an intense experience, my connection with life completely changed. I realized that my interest in material success, the fast-paced routine of meetings, promotions, and corporate positions, began to slowly fade away. With each passing year, I felt less drawn to that relentless race and noticed that my soul longed for something very different. Little by little, my life took a new direction, guided more by the heart and less by the cold logic of material success. Over time, I came to understand that my true pursuit was to help others connect with the deep spiritual dimension I had experienced. It was then that I began distancing myself from corporate life and decided to forge a path more aligned with what my soul desired. I quit my traditional job and sought out activities with a more genuine purpose, something that could not only enrich my own life but also inspire and transform those around me. It was during this process that I discovered IANDS, the International Association of Near-Death Studies. Through this amazing group, I was able to give name and meaning to what I experienced and realize that I was not alone on this journey. Every meeting and every shared story further fueled my desire to understand, learn, and convey everything I went through. Today, I continue to explore, reflect, and share my experience, hoping to awaken in others the recognition of that powerful spiritual connection that is within reach of all of us. One of the greatest lessons I took from that experience was realizing that although we call it a near-death experience, we don't always have to be facing a medical emergency or a traumatic event to access that deep connection. Some people reach that state through intense meditation or other profound states of consciousness. I firmly believe that this spiritual connection is available to all of us, and that we should not limit our ability to access it only to extreme or traumatic moments. My greatest hope in sharing this story is to awaken in others the curiosity and genuine desire to seek out this connection for themselves without having to face a situation as dramatic as mine. We all have this potential to connect with something much greater, an inexhaustible source of love and wisdom. It is a journey of personal discovery, accessible through regular practice of introspection, silence, and a true encounter with our spiritual essence. After my experience, I developed a regular meditation practice that, over the years, has evolved and deepened more and more. I began incorporating techniques based on sounds and vibrational frequencies, seeking to reconnect, even if only briefly, with that wonderful state I experienced on the other side. Although I can achieve profound moments of connection in my meditations, I confess that nothing compares to the full, sublime intensity of that spiritual experience that forever changed my life. However, there is one thing that is inevitable after an experience like mine: longing. There are moments, no matter how deeply I try to connect through meditation, when I feel a profound sadness, as if something is missing. That yearning to return to that state of total unity and such intense love can be overwhelming. Human life, with its limitations and challenges, sometimes feels so far removed from that place of absolute peace. It is a complex feeling because, on the surface, people may look at me and think, how can someone who experienced something so profound feel sadness? The truth is that the awareness of a broader, more magnificent reality can create a huge contrast with the day-to-day of earthly life. The longing for that state of total connection is a subtle yet constant pain that only those who have gone through something similar can fully understand. However, I know that this feeling does not define who I am. I know that my true self is the one that was in that place of pure love, not the human being who experiences the pains of existence. The experience of feeling this longing has taught me the importance of being patient with myself. It is not easy to integrate such a transformative experience with everyday reality. It requires time, compassion, and above all, self-love. I know that as long as I am here, in this human life, I can still feel connected to my true self, one that is part of that infinite love, and that, deep down, everything is okay, even when the longing hits hard. During my childhood, I always wondered what the purpose of life was. Given the difficult and seemingly meaningless reality I lived in, I couldn't see any profound significance in everyday experiences. But after my experience, that doubt was completely dispelled. Today, without the slightest shadow of doubt, I know what the purpose of life is. It is to live in order to experience, and above all, to experience unconditional love. It's curious how, in our daily lives, we often become so focused on seeking something outside of ourselves: a better job, a bigger house, a personal achievement that fills the void, that we end up forgetting that the true essence of life isn't found in any of these external things. When I'm in the creative process, for example, painting, I feel so connected to the flow of life in such a pure way that I don't even question the meaning of my existence. The answer comes naturally, like a sigh. The meaning is simply to be present, to live love in its purest form without rush, without pressures. The search for this love isn't found in material goods, social status, or any external validation. When we manage to connect with our deepest essence, when we connect with our soul, there's no need to look any further. Life becomes an expression of what is already within us. We don't need to search for love or happiness because they are already with us, waiting to be experienced. And when we allow ourselves to live in that way, the true meanings of life reveal themselves before us effortlessly, simply flowing. Today, I know that the search for meaning in life is not a race toward something distant. It exists in every present moment, in every breath, in every simple gesture. Life is not a series of lessons to be learned or challenges to be overcome, but rather a journey of discoveries and experiences. And the greatest discovery is that everything we need is already within us. Our purpose is to be, to live, and to love. This transformative realization led me to a new way of seeing the world. The idea that we are here to learn or do something grand no longer makes sense to me. True greatness lies in simply living with an open heart, in finding joy in the little things, and in sharing the love that emanates from within us. Life becomes lighter when we understand that there is nothing we need to do to prove our worth. Indeed, the greatest gift we can give to the world is our authentic self, without masks or false pretenses. And when we live in that way, when we connect with our essence, we see that life, in its simplicity, is absolutely perfect. There is no need to chase after a happiness that eludes us, because happiness is a natural consequence of living in alignment with who we truly are, and that is the secret I brought back from that experience. Life is simple, and all we need is to be present, loving, and being loved.